Why? Why does everything fall apart? I gave everything, and this is what I get? I can't take this anymore.
Why does it always have to be this way? I tried so hard to hold everything together. I can't fight anymore. I'm so tired.
Left, right, left. We keep moving.
The film begins at a U.S. Marine Corps training camp on October 7th, 2007. 4 days later, Captain Michael Harris is deployed to Afghanistan. He writes a sorrowful farewell letter to be delivered to his wife in case he doesn't return home. He hands the letter to the major, hoping it won't need to be sent. The main character returns home. Michael is a model family man with a wonderful wife named Emily and 2 daughters, Lily and Sophie. His younger brother David is his complete opposite. He has just been released from prison after serving time for bank robbery. Michael meets his brother and they drive toward town. The home is filled with warmth. Emily, Michael's wife, is preparing dinner to celebrate David's release. At that moment, David arrives and the door is opened by his younger niece, who immediately tells on her mom, saying she doesn't like him. Finally, the family gathers for dinner to celebrate the return of one son and bless the other, who is about to leave for Afghanistan. Their father, Robert, starts getting angry with David and compares him to Michael, who serves his country instead of breaking the law. Your brother's a hero. The father keeps stirring things up and it ends in an argument with Robert leaving the house. As he leaves, David asks his brother to be careful. Be safe over there. That evening, Michael takes off his wedding ring and his wife hangs it around her neck and tells him she loves him. 5 days later, Michael is already driving through the Afghan desert and says he feels at home there. He records everything on his phone as they pass by destroyed equipment. Soon, the helicopter carrying him and his squad is shot down and they crash. Emily is taking a bath when suddenly the doorbell rings. Her older daughter opens the door and sees 2 soldiers who have come to deliver the horrible news about her father's death. Emily can't accept it. She rewatches old videos of her husband and keeps dialing Michael's phone number. Michael Harris, please leave a message. That night, a drunk David arrives at the house to return a car. He's surprised Emily is so upset over a broken headlight. Then, in tears, she tells David what happened to his brother. He is the last one to learn of the tragedy, as no one could reach him all day. He starts yelling at her, saying they never should have let Michael go to Afghanistan. David returns to his parents' house and sits on the porch, where his stepmother meets him and invites him inside. But he says he wants to be alone. Emily gets the girls ready for the funeral, but the daughters refuse to wear black dresses. At the funeral, the widow receives that same farewell letter. After the ceremony, Robert has been drinking, and David tries to take the keys so his father won't drive drunk. Robert again reproaches his youngest and compares him to his older brother. But David also has something to say to the old man. He wasn't a great father or husband, and he filled Michael's head with military nonsense. Eventually, Robert walks home. Emily is afraid to open the letter and puts it away. Back in Afghanistan, the Taliban are escorting 2 soldiers. Turns out Michael and another soldier, Private Daniel Cooper, survived. The Taliban captured them and threw them into a zindan, an underground prison. A hero's final letter, sealed with a promise to return, becomes a testament to a love cut short. A family, already fractured by past mistakes, is shattered by a loss that feels too final to bear. But when a fate worse than death emerges from the dust of a foreign land, a broken brother must rise from the ashes of grief to become the only hope for a truth no one dares to believe. That sometimes death is just the beginning of the nightmare. The chill of an October morning at the camp, Lejeune training camp, was more than just seasonal. It was a cold that seeped into the bones of every Marine awaiting deployment. On October 7th, 2007, the air crackled not with the usual bravado, but with a heavy, unspoken anxiety. For Captain Michael Harris, it was a familiar sensation, yet this time it felt different, more profound. 4 days later, as he packed his duffel bag with methodical precision, his eyes fell on a photograph taped inside his locker. His wife, Emily, their daughters Lily and Sophie, all laughing in a sun-drenched backyard that felt a universe away. It was then that the premonition, a cold trickle of dread, solidified into action. Sitting on his bunk, the cheap, stationary ruff beneath his hands, Michael penned his sorrow. Each word of the farewell letter was a battle, a concession to a possibility he refused to entertain, but was honor-bound to acknowledge. "My dearest Emily," he began, the pen scratching loudly in the silent barracks. He wrote of a love that was his anchor, of memories that were his sanctuary, and of a future he vowed to fight for. He asked her to tell Lily to be brave, and Sophie to never stop laughing. He handed the sealed envelope to his major, a man named Peters, whose eyes held the weary understanding of one who had delivered too many such letters. "See that it doesn't get sent." "Sir," Michael said, his voice steady, though his knuckles were white where he gripped the paper. The major simply nodded, placing it not in the outgoing tray, but in a locked drawer labeled pending. It was a drawer every soldier hoped to empty upon their return. Weeks earlier, the Harris household was a bastion of normalcy, a world away from the deserts of Afghanistan. Michael was a model family man, his love for his wife Emily, a tangible force that filled their comfortable home. Their daughters, 10-year-old Lily, thoughtful and serious, and 6-year-old Sophie, a whirlwind of energy, were the center of their universe. This warmth stood in stark contrast to the world of Michael's younger brother, David. David Harris was his brother's opposite in almost every way. Where Michael was structured and disciplined, David was all sharp edges and restless energy. He had just been released from a 2-year stint in prison for a poorly planned bank robbery, a desperate act he still struggled to explain. Michael, ever the protector, was there to pick him up from the gate. The silence in the car during the drive into town, louder than any argument. "Emily's making a welcome home dinner," Michael said finally, breaking the tension. David just stared out the window at the passing suburbs, a landscape of a life he no longer fit into. "Great," he muttered, the word laced with sarcasm and a hint of shame. The dinner was an exercise in forced cheerfulness. Emily had prepared a feast, a gesture of forgiveness and family. When David arrived, it was Sophie who opened the door, her small face a mask of childish honesty. "Mom says we have to be nice to you because you're sad," she announced, "but I don't like you." The comment hung in the air, causing Emily to flush with embarrassment, and David to offer a wry, pained smile. As the family gathered around the table, the purpose of the evening was twofold: to celebrate David's release and to bless Michael's impending deployment. Their father, Robert, a Vietnam veteran with a permanently set jaw and eyes that held old ghosts, began the inevitable descent into conflict. He raised a glass, not to David, but to Michael. "To my son," he boomed, his voice rough with pride and whiskey. A hero, serving his country, not like some who serve time. The air left the room. David flinched as if struck. Emily reached for Michael's hand under the table. The comparison was a weapon Robert wielded with brutal efficiency. The argument that followed was a well-rehearsed play of old grievances and fresh wounds, ending with Robert storming out, slamming the door so hard, the pictures on the wall rattled. In the painful quiet that followed, David looked at his brother, all anger gone, replaced by a genuine fear. "Just be safe over there, Mikey," he whispered, using a childhood nickname he hadn't uttered in years. That night, in the sanctuary of their bedroom, Michael carefully twisted off his wedding ring. Emily took it, her fingers trembling slightly, and threaded it onto a delicate silver chain she wore around her neck. She pressed the cool metal against her skin, a permanent keepsake close to her heart. "I love you," she said, her voice thick with tears she refused to shed. "You come back to me, Michael Harris." He pulled her close, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a shifting world. "Always," he promised into her hair. 5 days later, the sun in the Afghan desert was a merciless, white-hot orb. Michael, crammed into a Humvee, felt a strange sense of purpose settle over him. "You know, Coop," he said to Private Daniel Cooper, a young soldier with eager eyes, "as messed up as it is, I feel focused here." He recorded a video on his satellite phone, panning across the stark, beautiful landscape. Past the skeletal remains of a Soviet tank, grim reminder of the graveyard of empires they now traversed. "See that, girls?" he said, forcing cheer into his voice for the camera. History. The transition from focused calm to chaos was instantaneous. A sudden, deafening roar, a violent lurch, and the world turned upside down. Their helicopter, a giant metal bird, was struck by an RPG. Alarm shrieked. The cabin filled with smoke and the smell of fuel. And Michael's last conscious thought was of Emily's face, the ring hanging against her chest. Then, impact. Back home, Emily was submerged in the warm, steamy water of a bath, seeking a moment of solitude. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Lily, curious, ran to answer it. Emily heard the door open, then a long, unnatural silence. Wrapping herself in a towel, she called out, "Lily! Who is it?" She walked into the living room and froze. 2 soldiers in immaculate dress uniforms stood in her doorway, their faces carved from stone. Lily was staring up at them, her small body rigid with confusion. Time seemed to slow. Emily saw the folded American flag one of them held reverently. She didn't need to hear the words, "On behalf of a grateful nation," before her legs gave way. The sound that escaped her was not a cry, but a wail of pure primal denial. In the days that followed, the house became a tomb of grief. Emily moved through it like a ghost, mechanically making school lunches while her heart shattered anew with every breath. She would open her laptop and play old videos. Michael teaching Lily to ride a bike. Michael dancing with a giggling Sophie in the kitchen. And in her darkest moments, she would pick up her phone, her thumb hovering over his name before pressing call. Each time it would ring, and then a voice, too cheerful, too alive, would answer, "You've reached Michael Harris. Please leave a message." She would listen to the beep, her breath catching, but could never find the words to speak to the void. That same night, headlights cut through the darkness as David's beat-up sedan pulled into Emily's driveway. He was drunk, the kind of drunk that was meant to numb the constant ache of being David Harris. He stumbled out, intending to just leave the keys in the mailbox for the car he'd borrowed. He noticed a broken headlight, probably from clipping the mailbox, and winced. When Emily opened the door, her face was ravaged by tears. "Look, Em, I'm sorry about the light." "I'll fix it," he slurred, misreading her anguish entirely. She stared at him, her eyes hollow. "David." "It's Michael," she whispered. The news, delivered in a tear-soaked torrent, hit him with the force of a physical blow. He was the last to know. His phone had been disconnected for weeks. The alcohol in his system twisted his shock into a raging fire. "Afghanistan," he yelled, his voice echoing in the quiet street. I told him not to go. You all let him go. You all thought he was some kind of goddamn hero." He was screaming at a grief-stricken widow, but he was screaming at his father, at the world, at the brother who had left him behind. He drove recklessly to his parents' house, not knowing where else to go. He collapsed on the front porch, head in his hands. His stepmother, a gentle woman named Carol, opened the door. "David, come inside, honey," she said softly. "I want to be alone," he growled, the words choked with tears. She left him there, a solitary figure swallowed by the night, drowning in a sea of guilt and loss. The day of the funeral was unbearably bright. Emily tried to dress the girls, but they rebelled. Lily refused to wear the somber black dress, throwing it on the floor. "I hate it. It's ugly and sad," she screamed. Sophie, taking her cue from her sister, began to cry. It was a rebellion against the unacceptable, a child's defiance in the face of death. The service was a blur of muffled sobs, stiff handshakes, and patriotic platitudes. Michael was posthumously awarded a medal. But for Emily, the most devastating moment came when Major Peters approached her, his eyes full of pity. He wordlessly pressed an envelope into her hands. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the letter. That night, after putting the sedated girls to bed, she sat at her kitchen table, the pristine white envelope staring back at her. To open it would be to accept his voice was now only ink on paper, that his thoughts were finite. With a trembling hand, she slid it into a kitchen drawer, hiding it behind the tea towels, unable to face its finality. After the ceremony, Robert, drowning his grief in a bottle of bourbon, fumbled for his car keys. David, sobered by the day's events, stepped in front of him. "You're not driving, old man," he said, his voice flat. Robert's grief curdled into familiar anger. "Don't you tell me what to do," he slurred, puffing out his chest. "You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing like your brother." He was a hero. "You're just a damn convict." But this time, David didn't shrink. He stepped closer, his own pain giving him a terrifying clarity. "You want to talk about heroes?" David spat. "You weren't a hero. You were a terrible father and a worse husband. You filled Michael's head with all that glory and honor. Crap just so he could end up in a box in the ground. You did this." The truth of the words hung between them. Robert, deflated and broken, simply turned and shuffled away into the twilight, walking the long miles home alone. Back in the harsh, sun-baked mountains of Afghanistan, a line of Taliban fighters, their faces obscured by turbans, moved like ghosts through a rocky pass. They escorted 2 prisoners, their uniforms torn, faces bruised and bloodied. Their hands were bound, and they stumbled on the rough terrain. As one of the prisoners lifted his head, squinting against the relentless sun, a shocking realization dawned. Impossible, yet undeniable. It was Captain Michael Harris. Beside him, barely conscious, was Private Daniel Cooper. They had survived the crash, only to be captured. The Taliban fighters shoved them forward towards a dark, ominous hole in the ground, a zindan. This was not a prison with bars and guards. It was a forgotten pit, an underground dungeon carved from the earth itself. As Michael was thrown into the abyss, the darkness swallowing him whole. The last thing he saw was the faint glint of the sun against the rocky ledge above. The fight for survival was over. A new, more horrifying battle had just begun. The letter in Emily's drawer was not an epilogue. It was a prologue to a nightmare. And David, the broken brother, was the only one left who might dare to question the official story and fight to bring the dead back to life.